If I were to ask you to rank Donkey Kong Country Returns from 1 to 10 on a scale of difficulty, where would you put it? I'm guessing that a lot of you would put it in the 5 to 7 mark. Challenging, but fair. Most people who have played Donkey Kong would consider them to have the perfect difficulty. Not too hard, not too easy. And I'm here today to tell you that that assessment is less accurate than me and Deep Rock Galactic.
Explosive!
Donkey Kong is actually a 13.75 out of 10 difficulty. And while I consider it to be in my top 5 games of all time, I am ashamed to admit that I've never beaten it. If we were to compare it to a baby game, such as Elden Ring, in my 100 hours of playtime, there was only one part that rivaled Donkey Kong in difficulty. And that was the Crucible Knight Evergaol fight close to the start of the game. I must have died around 40 times to this boss before I finally beat him. That's a good level in Donkey Kong. This game is so hard that I would just end up replaying the same levels in the first world over and over again, collecting enough banana coins to get the max amount of balloons. And if I ever tried to progress, I would usually run out of these near infinite lives. Now, why do I think that the Donkey Kong Country games are 20 times harder than everyone else says they are? Maybe it was because I was 5 when I tried to beat it. There has been a term that's been going around to describe a great many of games. Kirby, New 2D Mario, Minecraft, Yoshi, Pokemon, all of these games could classify as baby games. Or games that are so easy a baby could beat. A lot of people look at these big games and wonder why they feel like they're made for literal children. So I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. The elites don't want you to know this, but they are. I know it sounds crazy, but since I already let you in on that secret, let me show you another. But you gotta promise not to tell anybody. Everybody was once a child. The government has been trying to cover up for years. Beyonce is in on it. The president is in on it, but I found the truth. You see, children, there's these things called children, and they're the weirdest thing. They're like if you gave a potato limbs and the mental capacity of a toaster. When you think about it, children are a lot like potatoes. They're small, round, and don't fare too well when you hit them with a car. But most importantly, they both suck at video games. Unless they're grown in the magical land of South Korea, potatoes suck at video games. Same with children. So when you have a company like Nintendo, who makes games more aimed towards kids, it makes sense for the difficulty in these games to range from impossible to die to brain dead. The lack of difficulty makes sense. Problems tend to arise though when you're dealing with a pre-established franchise. Mario 3D World is a game I strongly dislike. Every 3D Mario until that point had been quite challenging in one way or another. And coming from the Galaxy era, when I learned there was a pseudo-successor to those games called 3D World, I was beyond disappointed when I found out they were as creative and hard as doing the dishes. This game frustrates me to no end, and it firmly fits into the baby game category, but it's not a bad game. By the time I got around to playing 3D World on the Switch, I had already played every other 3D Mario game, and I was pretty experienced in the genre. But if I were to recommend a 3D platformer to someone who had never played one before, I would have to say Mario 3D World. So even games that greatly deviate from the other games in this franchise in terms of difficulty are not worthless. They're a great jumping in point. Another complaint thrown at baby games is that they would be greatly improved by adding difficulty settings. And if you've ever met a person who's played Dark Souls, you would know that's a terrible idea. Difficulty settings are very nice, and they have a time and a place, but they can oftentimes ruin what would be a shared experience. FromSoft games, Cuphead, Hollow Knight, these games would not be the same if you didn't get to mercilessly mock the kid who dared complain about NKG's difficulty. Get good. Sorry. With games with a single difficulty setting, you always know that you're enjoying the intended experience. Everything is made around this one difficulty. When you die 100 times to the stupid dragon in Cuphead, you can instantly relate to anyone else who fought the same boss because you most likely had a similar experience. An experience of pain and suffering. The same thing applies to these quote-unquote baby games. Every 6-year-old who spent 4 months beating New Super Mario Bros. Wii now has a shared experience with every other 6-year-old who did the same thing. And that's worth more than any difficulty setting. While yes, there are games like Animal Crossing, Minecraft, Roblox, video games for children that are almost impossible to die in, if not impossible to die in, and focused on expressing creativity more than anything, this still greatly limits the amount of genres children can partake in. So you need Baby's First Platformer, Baby's First RPG, and Baby's First Shooter, so they can experience these genres in an accessible manner. I'm not saying that baby games are always good, and the lack of difficulty, especially in Nintendo games, can sting or even ruin my enjoyment in a game. But they're still important nonetheless, because without them, a good amount of us would have given up on our gaming journey before it even began. In conclusion, does anyone know how to emulate Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Switch? Because
Fabio, this is Nintendo! Come out with your hands up! We have you surrounded! You have the right to remain silent! Any copyrighted music can and will be used against you!